So what I was hoping for today's conversation is it would be wonderful to be able to ask you some questions where you can speak through me to my students. My work in education is about rehumanizing the learning process. And I noticed in your book, in Biology of Love, that you're really talking about creating the atmosphere in which intelligence flourishes and discernment flourishes, and our capacity to see more happens in a context of trust, intimacy, and cooperation. So I love your ideas. I mean, to me, your work has been really important in my life as I begin to understand it. You're giving me a foundation to stand on for the work that I do. And for that,
Thank you very much.
Very grateful.
Whatever I may tell you now, is he filming already?
Yeah.
Please do.
Yes.
Okay. Is expression of what we are doing here in the Institute. And what we are doing here has to do with what we have been doing with Jimena Dávila, is mentioned in this book when I speak about my present, in what we call cultural biology, as the unity of humanness. Not culture and biology, but cultural biology. And this is something that Jimena and I have developed essentially through the work of her in something that she calls liberating conversations. And I'm going to tell a little bit about this so that you have the background of whatever I may say. ¿Tenemos por ahí algún libro del habitar humano? ¿Sí? Claro, para que se lo demos, aunque sea en español. She came to me, I think it was 1999 or something like that, and said, "Doctor, I have made a discovery." And I said, "What is it?" And she said, "I have found out that the pain and suffering for which one asks for relational help is always of cultural origin, and particularly of this culture of us. And the person that consults me, she's a family consultant in profession, shows me the relational matrix in his or her life where she lived a negation of love. And as we talk, I talk, she said, with these people that consults me, the person shows me also the relational matrix through which one can go out of this pain. Now, the interesting thing that she was not speaking about an event, but about the history of conservation of the pain that arose in some moments in that particular event in the past, but in which it is not the event what is significant, but the fact that the event somehow is treated as valid by the culture, and the person conserves the pain as an aspect of his or her living all the life.
Yes.
And one can come out of that only through the recovery of self-love and self-respect. Okay, this is the grounding. When she said this, I said, oh, this is very interesting, because this is very different from what psychologists say, from Freud says, for example, whose attention is centered on the event. And she is attending to the dynamic of conservation of the pain such that it is always in the present of the living. Okay. And in this process, for me, it was very interesting, because I have spoken as a biologist in what I have written. And humanness is there. And humanness is there because I studied medicine, so I was, in a way, a biologist of humanness. I understood many aspects of the human process of development, humanness, and so on and so forth. But I had not, until I met Jimena, been faced with the actual human beings. If you see, and what she showed me, I mean, it's like opening a curtain and saying, look, I mean, there are actual human beings. Well, of course, it's not that I did not see actual human beings, but were not my concern. And so it's an opening, it's a new world that appears if you take this seriously, which I did. And we talk about it, and she said in her passion, the culture must be changed. We have to change the culture. And I said, we cannot change the culture, but the culture has to be changed through understanding. And through understanding, and we talk about it, the understanding of humanness. And so we created this institute, as Jimena says, to give a little push to this process.
Yes.
And we have been concerned with this theme of understanding the biological, cultural nature of humanness. Not biological only, not and cultural, but in its very origin, as it is implied there in this little book, although it's not fully developed, in its very origin, as a unity, as a manner of living that is conserved since the origin until, I mean, not until, but still now, and we hope that it will go being conserved.
Well, you named, in a sense, the wound that I think I see in the children in my culture. You said, we no longer know what happens with our children as they grow socially disconnected in a meaningless coexistence, or as they become unhappy beings with no sense of participation in the world in which they are supposed to be. Nor do we see that we depersonalize them to a future that is supposed to fulfill our desires, not theirs. And this is part of the dehumanization of the schooling process, I think.
Yes, and what has happened in this interaction with Jimena is that, at least for me, the children have a presence as children, as actual, real children there, not as concept biological beings. And what she has developed is a way of interacting such that self-love and self-respect are recovered through the person, not through the other, not through the not through the person that is consulted, but through the person that is consulting him or herself. And so my reflections on education have to do with what you have seen, and furthermore with this understanding of this biological cultural unity. But there is something more, which of course we know, and sometimes we know things that we do not take in consideration seriously, which is it's a biological situation. We know, of course, that the living being is a totality and exists in a medium, in a niche. But we not always see that what is there is not a living being and a niche, but the unity. Living being and niche. It's a relational unity. It's a human being, and not as, and its circumstance in the Ortega y Gasset sense, as the circumstance, is the good earth, so to say. The niche is that part of the medium in which life is realized. In our case, our human life is realized. And they change together. It's a unity. In reproduction, what you reproduce is this unity. Organism, niche. Human being, a niche, which is maybe family, a society, or whatever it is that is the domain in which he or she realizes his or her living. And this is a very interesting thing, because one realizes, and this is one important concern in us in what refers to education, that organism and niche change together congruently, spontaneously. They go together congruently in the conservation of living and the relation of realization of living. And this is why what leads us to think that education is a transformation in living together. It's not something that one gives to the child or to the young person. It's what occurs in living together, in which these young people and the adults with whom they are change together.
So I'm wondering if you can help me see how that concept would apply. What I've done recently is I've created what I call the learning journey rubric. You know, rubric is how we measure and what we measure. And so I take my students on journeys. Like we went to South Africa, we went to India, we go to Washington, D.C., we went to Ecuador, someday maybe to Chile. Mm-hmm. So my sense was from reading your book that there are elements of this learning journey that are very consistent. And as I've been doing this and listening to my students, I become more and more convinced that the process of engaging on the journey connects them with their own humanity. Their learning is their learning. I have no control over it. I only create a context in which they can learn. And when they tell me what they've learned, I learn.
Yeah. In this whole thing, in our reflections here, we have taken into consideration this biological fact that you cannot specify what the other person hears from what you say. And you have just said, I do not, their learning is their learning. And when they tell me what they learned, I understand something that is what I understand of what they tell me that they learned. But I do not know what they learned, but something will appear in their behavior. And this is what will happen in the return when it is back into the community. They will say, oh, you learn beautiful things because he fits in what I hear from him, and what we do together is wonderful, and we want to go on doing things together. But we never know what the other has found in himself or herself or thought and so on and so forth. So if this is so, then the real question is, what manner of living I shall say things that you think you know. I do not pretend to tell you things that you do not know, but telling what we think is to create a relational space in which the children can be themselves in trust that they are loving beings. Whatever situation they may be in the present, they are loving beings, not as a mythical essence, but as biological conditions. They are born loving beings. They are born in trust of finding the good earth. And the good earth is with some adult, human adult, female ideally or male, that will receive them and cuddle them and then accompany them and not betray them. No? And this is implicit trust, and sometimes we betray. We betray very terribly the children. And so this journey is a path of living and conserving one's self-respect and self-love in the creation of a world with others. So, and hopefully the others are doing the same thing. And in your school, I see that this is what you are doing. Create a space in which the children trust you in that you are a loving being with yourself as well as with them. So you are honest, you do not betray them, you listen to yourself and to them so that they can listen to you. And we think that what children want, and every human being wants, is others that they can respect. The children want adults that they can respect. And we all want somebody else that we can respect, because this is what will be our company. And I think that this quest is a quest for identity. How I'm going to be being a human being. And being a human being is being a loving being, doing whatever he or she wishes from him or herself in self-respect, self-love, and respect and love for the others, in the kind of life that happens to be present for me in the circumstances in which I am living. And I find that what you do with this schooling is very interesting in that sense. It's very powerful. It does that.
This is why I think Peter Bloch's work is so important, because he's talking about changing the conversation, shifting the conversation.
Yes, if we go a little bit more in this matter of the liberating conversation, the expression liberating comes from the other person, not from the person that is being consulted.
Yes.
It's the person that consults says, oh, thank you, I feel liberated, I feel lighter, or expressions like that. And what has happened there? Now, before saying that, there is this aspect of theories. We human beings are creators of theories about anything. Name whatever, and you can create a theory to validate it or to negate it. I mean, and these are systems of explanation. But we do not need theories to live. They are indeed superfluous for living, for good living, for loving, for doing things together. But if we have them, the temptation to follow the theories is very great. And it is the theory, this is what he was speaking about, putting whatever you are living in another domain of explanation. You don't have to explain. And great problems of our history in humanity is theories. Not that we should not do theories, we do theories. The problem is that we attach to them and we begin to see the world through the theory, and we do not see, and instead of using it to explain something, we use the theory to tell us what we live. And sometimes one asks somebody, please tell me your experience, and what you receive back is a theory. An explanation, or theoretical explanation of whatever you have felt. And so in these conversations, there is a conversation about what the person wants to talk. And if there is pain, the people want to talk about the pain. And the conversation goes into a reflection on how the pain came about. And when one learned to live with the pain, not in terms of what happened, although somebody may tell or not tell what happened, but how come that you have learned to live your living with that pain? Yeah. Because this conversation of pain along life is like having a stationary manner of relating, and the pain is everywhere. It's not that you live now, the pain that you live then. You live now, the pain that you live now, that you have been living every day since then, and has been present in whatever you have done, until you discover that that pain is cultural, has nothing to do with you. It's a negation, it's a cultural negation that negates your being, but your being is untouchable for that, because your being is what you do. So that's this social validation of what happened to you because you deserve to be negated or whatever it is not valid. And when you discover that, you discover it not through a theory, through realizing that it doesn't have to do with you.
Yeah. So there's an awakening.
It's an awakening. An awakening in the experience. And what happened with children is that we betray that fundamental trust. We say that the child is born in trust in the same way that the butterfly comes out of the cocoon, in trust. In trust of what? There will be for the butterfly flowers, nectar, or whatever it is for living, and for the child, a mother, a father, a family, adults around that will hold him or her and will not betray him. And this, as I hear, this is what I hear, these trips that you make are trips that you go with your students in a space in which you do things that they trust and so they can see.
Yes.
But at the same time they trust you that you are not going to betray them, that you are not going to abandon them in the middle of the path, or something like that, psychically or physically or whatever way. And as they do that, they leave this trip, they are strengthened in their self-love, and they can begin to say yes or no from themselves, not from a theory, not from the expectations, not from what the other people may hear, and then they are back home. And that is to be back home.
Yeah. And the coming back home, the return, is in some ways the hardest part of the journey.
Yes, because correspond that you indeed can live in that. You are free of the theories, free of the opinions of others. Not that you become blind to theories or blind to the opinions of others, but you are free from the pressure. They do not guide what you do. You use them, the theory, if you wish, but the theory doesn't use you.
So the experience produces a knowing.
The experience produces a knowing of living, and the circumstances in which you live, whatever you live, if it is a loving circumstance, self-respect circumstances, trusting circumstances, produces the tranquility of that you can love yourself, and then the security that you can love yourself in any circumstance.
So there's two things that I have realized in this on both ends. First is a precondition is a sense of safety.
Yes.
So I spend most of my time not on content, but on creating an atmosphere of trust.
Yes. This is what you do, I think. I mean, I can listen to that. Because you listen to them. You did not speak about what they should learn or should do. You let them learn whatever may happen. So this is a trust. You trust them. And what do you trust? That they are loving beings. I mean, that they are intelligent, that they want to do the things well, that they want to be with others that respect them and that they respect. And the children want that. When the child says to the father or to the brother or to the mother or to the teacher, how do you do that? He's telling you everything. He's telling you that he's interested or she's interested, that he or she trusts you, that he is willing to acquire those abilities because are attractive to him or her and make sense to him or her.
So the other piece on the other end of it is the recognition of the power of people coming together in positive regard.
Yeah, but you don't need to speak about power.
Well, perhaps that's not the right word, but
No, but it's okay, but
it's the energy that is released or created when people come together in positive regard.
In trust.
Yeah. So I see that through your work here, through and through. You're creating a biological explanation of why that is so, and that's why it's so exciting to me, is to get that kind of validation.
Exactly, and at the same time, the explanation is something that opens your understanding and guides your doing in the understanding, but not in the description of the theory of what to do or what is.
Yeah, it creates an opening. And I am a student to my students now. I finally have achieved that. It's taken me a long time.
And all these threads rest on something else, which is that we are aware that we do not distinguish in the experience between what we call perception and illusion. We live everything that we live as valid in the moment that we live it. Every living being does that. Whatever he or she or it is living is valid in the moment in which it is lived. And so illusion and perception are not in themselves, are comparisons of experiences.
So here's something that comes from that. When we talk about the psychic space, you talk about the psychic space. The awareness I'm coming to is how much emotion plays in that and how discredited in some ways emotion is.
Yes. We say we are rational beings, but what we are is emotional beings that use reason to validate or negate their emotions. We have theories to justify the negation of love, but we do not need a theory to love. Isn't that interesting? We have theories to kill, we have theories to do all the things terrible that we do. But we don't need a theory to love, because it's spontaneous in us. The seeing in other, our general question is, how come that we care for the other? And there is no philosophy or not a political theory or not religious theory that can make us care for the other. We may accept this philosophical or political or religious theory for caring for the other because we care for the other. It is not our caring for the other arises from the theories. We do not need theories for caring for the other. It happens in us. But we use theories to deny love. Huh? And this centers us in what you have said, in the experience, in what we live. Reality is not there. Science has nothing to do with reality. Science has to do with how we do things together and explain things together, using our experience to explain our experience. Using what we do to explain what we do in the domain in which we live as human beings.
So that ties right into this book here on Raimundo Panikkar. His father was Indian. His mother was Spanish, and he is a Catholic priest. And this book has had a profound influence. But when he talks about the word vak, which is the sacred word, he talks about the sages. He said they sat in a circle to name the world into existence. Now he comes from, this is a patriarchal lineage, but vak, word, is feminine. And I thought that was interesting because you talked about language arose from the intimacy of a mother and a child. So essentially, language has a very feminine aspect. And so from the Vedic perspective, when they sat together and spoke the sacred word, it was the feminine that was being called into being. And through that dynamic, it said to name something for what it is to enter into a very intimate relationship with that thing. So language is based in some ways in intimacy. And that from that came community and friendship. I'm thinking that from your theory, in some ways, it was community and friendship that actually, through which language evolved.
Exactly. Because languaging is not an instrument to name things. It's a manner of living together, doing things, coordinating feelings, coordinating emotions, coordinating doings together. What doings? Whatever the doings of living together. And things arise in that way. They do not pre-exist.
So through relationship and intimacy, in a sense, he's from a different perspective. I think he's saying the same thing, and that it takes, in a way, great acuity of mind to discover. It isn't named, to discover what things are.
Exactly. And to discover that indeed we are generating the world that we live, not creating as somebody making a building, but generating the world as we live it.
Yeah. Building the plane while we fly it.
We are building the plane, we are not yet flying, but we're going to fly, we go on building the plane. And when we fail and continue building the plane, it comes to an end.
Would you say that in some ways Zamina, when she came into the picture, essentially brought that feminine aspect into the dialogue or into the conversation in a profound way?
I would say not that when she came to the picture. When she came and we met, the picture changed. It's not my picture with Jimena or not Jimena's picture with me. It's a new picture. Because it's a new understanding. This is something that we usually do not fully see, that any change of understanding is a change of world. If something new appears. It's not something that was there before. Biology, cultural biology, is an understanding of the biological cultural unity. It's not the union of culture and biology. But that unity, the understanding of that unity was not there while we were thinking culture and when we were thinking biology.
So something more happens.
Something more happened. It's a new understanding. It has roots here and there, but it's new.
So what about that moment of understanding? When there's that realization where things connect in a way that they weren't connected before and the world changes. Have you thought about that?
It's a moment in which you have to release what you know. You have to release what you know to see something new. For example, we were invited to Istanbul a few months ago. And we went together because we were invited to do a presentation together. There was a Congress of Family and Couple Therapy in Turkish. There were no foreigners but us, because they had invited the Institute and we went there. And we did not know Turkish, we spoke in Spanish, and they had translators for us. But in this process we made what we call reflective circles. And which is a meeting which we say, we invite the people to ask their question, and picking up whatever question they have, we add here and there whatever we consider is adequate to have present in what one would call knowledge of the biology or whatever it is. But in this process, conversations take place in which reflection expands. And somebody, or in some moment, suddenly you find yourself thinking different. Now, the president of the Congress, a psychiatrist, was a person that was very ceremonious, at the beginning at least, addressing us with great ceremony and respect, which is, but the ceremoniousness was the most remarkable thing. And at the end of was 2 days, he was not so ceremonious anymore. He was himself, and went to Jimena and said, "Jimena, I love you," and embraced her. I mean, this would have been not dream at the beginning, although they are very friendly people. And then Jimena asked, "What has happened to you with these 2 days?" And he said, "I found myself doing it. What shall I do now?" And this means exactly, there was a shift in him, a change, in which he was finding himself in a new situation, in a new understanding, in which he had to invent what to do. But this was, what shall I do now, was not in despair, was in awe.
Yeah.
In awe for the understanding.
Yeah.
I remember, this is a little personal history, when I was studying color vision, because all my history begins, this part of my history begins when I was studying how do we see colors in the medical school in Santiago in the early 60s. And I was doing experiments with pigeons and trying to map the colors as I presented them in speaking about the spectral composition or the wavelength composition of the color that I presented. I wanted to map it in my recordings in the retina and the brain to see how did the pigeon saw the colors. Or better than that, which was the correlation between the spectral composition, which was the color, in what I was saying, and the retinal activity. And then I realized that I could not make that correlation. And it was not a failure of mine. And this is the jump. I thought the question is not properly presented. Maybe the question is not how does the spectral composition of the color correlate with the activity of the retina or the brain. Perhaps the activity of the retina correlates with the name of the color. Exactly. I said to myself the same that you had just, what is this? And my colleague said that. But it turns out that in illusions, in situations that we call illusions, we give the same name to situations which from another perspective are different.
From another
perspective
are
different.
different.
For example, you go in the street and see a friend, John, excuse me, a mistake. Huh? But when you were saying John, you felt the joy, the pleasure of seeing John. And afterwards, you say, oh, it was a mistake, it was somebody else. But you call John to a situation in your living that from the perspective of whatever reflection you made afterwards, you said, no, it could not be John, it was an illusion. And so I ask, perhaps the activity of the retina correlates with the name, because the name is a reflection of the state of activity of the brain of the observer. Because he's telling what is happening to him. John is telling what happens to me. He's not telling what is happening there. And this becomes apparent when you say, oh, excuse me, it's a mistake. For whatever circumstance you say. So this is what means that we do not distinguish in the experience itself between what we call perception and what we call illusion. That was an illusion because through another experience I say, no, cannot be John. But when I was saying hello to John, my experience was, John, how wonderful he's here, or whatever it is. And then, oh no, it was a mistake.
So in some ways you're saying that the pigeon or the retina is not necessarily responding as much to the color as what's already...
Exactly. Although the color, or whatever is there, is necessary for this whole situation to take place. Somebody must be there, so you say John. But when you are saying John, you are not connecting with somebody there, but with something in you.
Right.
You are happy because John is there, but John, oh no, it cannot be. No, it's not John.
So the pattern has to be in the mind to start.
Exactly. So I said, indeed, I went to work with the retina and show that indeed the activity of the retina correlates with the name. Accepting situations, we're treating in the same way situations to which we give the same name, although they have different spectral compositions.
So the naming takes place in here, then?
The naming reveals what happens to you. Wow. And what is happening to you is that you treat as John whatever situation you find which satisfies something in you. Okay. And then I did to myself something similar what this doctor in Istanbul did. My goodness, what am I going to do now?
So I have a question, an important question for you, and you don't have to answer it, but I suspect that you have an internal transformation that has been taking place through this experience.
Yes, it's an internal transformation.
And I'm curious about how you would name that transformation, because it feels to me, and I got this from your emails, you know, when we finally connected, I got this sense of unqualified welcoming.
Yes.
I felt that.
Wonderful. I'm glad that you did, because this is what I wanted to happen.
And I thought to myself, you're living your own unfolding in some important way. And it doubled my sense of excitement that I was going to get to meet you. Because I felt this sincerity of living what you were thinking rather than just talking what you were thinking.
I'm glad that you did that. And this was an occasion. What shall I do now with the colors? But when we met with Jimena, something similar happened in terms of, how can I understand these facts that one is living continuously something that happened in the past, not that one is living the memory that one has been living all the time, conserving something, conserving a pain, completely unaware that one is conserving it.
And why do you think we conserve the pain? I think this is a really important point.
I think that we conserve the pain because we have accepted as valid the devaluation that we received in that negation of love. And we have accepted as valid for cultural circumstances. And the cultural circumstances are still there. For example, if a girl is abused, sexually abused, and she says to the mother, "Mother, my uncle has done this or that," and the mother says, "No, your uncle cannot have done that." So the culture is giving validity to the situation that caused her pain. And her life is transformed completely in terms of the devaluation of her own validity from then on.
Yeah, so that's powerful.
When one says to a child, "Oh, you are not good, you are good for nothing," and the child goes on being good for nothing. And if you listen to this person, began to be good for nothing at 5, is good for nothing at 10, is good for nothing at 15, is good for nothing at 40, every day.
So they're conserving the pain.
The devaluation. And this conservation, devaluation, conserves the pain. Because the pain is the accepting the validity of the devaluation.
So when we have these conversations of liberation or transformation, then what we're doing is shifting our relationship in some way to that event.
No, shifting our relationship with ourselves. This is what Jimena shows. It's not related to the past.
No.
It's related to the present.
Shifting the relationship of how we have conserved.
Even without realizing that you have conserved, but suddenly you find you are not conserving it anymore.
Yeah.
Because you are respecting yourself.
So there's something that happens automatically in that process.
Exactly. And all these changes of understanding, this is why all these expressions, for example, like illumination, that understanding, that becoming aware, are so powerful because you change of the world and you enter in an entirely new domain. What I mean by entirely new domain is the domain which cannot have been deduced from what was before. I could not have deduced from what I write here what happens with the biology, understanding of the cultural biology. I can come to it, but not deduce. And how do I come to it? Changing domain.
So this is a journey also.
It's a journey also. It's not a negation of the past. I'm not saying the past is not valid or the understanding, but that understanding took me to this point. And now something else happened that have another expansion of my vision in which this, of course, is valid, but there is something new, entirely new. And we do not know this. One of the problems in science, for example, is the novelty. But novelty is appearing all the time. Whenever there is a recursion, whenever there is a reflection, a novelty appears, because what you see in the reflection is new. Now, if we think that there is a reality and what we are seeing is real, we will say, no, it was there before, it's only that you have seen it. But you cannot say that there was before anything, because you cannot distinguish in the experience between perception and illusion. You never know if what you are living is an illusion, or you are going to treat it as an illusion, or treat it as a perception. So in your living is entirely new, could not have been deduced from the past. But in the flow of existence is always new.
I love that. We did a retreat, a workshop at Mount Maturana one time called Harnessing Surprise.
Yeah.
So when we live this way, it's always new, there's always a surprise.
It's always a surprise. And then, of course, this is one of the beautiful things of humanness. We can look at this from a broader perspective. And we can relate things which we speak as if they were logically related and not only correlations.
So I wonder sometimes, do you know Brian Swim? He's a cosmologist.
Yes.
What I got from Brian was that here we are at the expanding front of 13.7 billion years of evolution. Yes. And I think about that, and I think how nature creates the conditions for life, and life creates the conditions for life at increasing levels of complexity, to the point where we became sentient and we could go, look at this, isn't this amazing?
And it is like a wavefront. If you drop this little stone and see the wave expanding, where is the wavefront? There, in the wavefront. Now, if you look from several places, you can invent an origin through correlations. But the origin is not there. It's an invention, because you are in the wavefront, in the present, in a continuously changing present.
I was so struck by that comment, the continuously changing present. That you can spend a lot of time reflecting on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck the language that you use in the book. There are things that you've named something or connected with something that kind of opens. There's an opening of the mind that takes place. Oh, and of course, it's all about correlations.
Yes.
So I find a lot in my experience that correlates with what you write about. And we're probably almost out of time. I know you have other things to do, but what does this cause in you as a state of sort of emotional being, emotional living? What would you say is the fruit in your own life of this journey of discovery that you've been on? What is the product?
The way I'm living now.
What would be the elements of what you're conserving at this point as your manner of living that are most operative?
Let's say I'm conserving three things. I'm conserving my family, my relation with my wife, my children. I'm conserving my work, my relationship with Jimena, and what we do here together. and I'm conserving my self-respect and self-love. Now, what do I mean by this self-respect and self-love? About a year ago, in the euphoria of novelty and entrepreneurship and so on and so forth, a friend came to me and said, I come from a club of innovators. Oh, I said. And he said, what, you are not impressed with the innovation? I said, I would like a club of conservators. What do you mean? Oh, I would like to conserve honesty, I would like to conserve seriousness in my work, I would like to conserve self-respect and respect for the other, I would like to conserve collaboration. And novelty will appear there in a meaningful manner, not as a result of the push for novelty, because novelty is appearing anyhow, all the time. Now, what do we want to conserve? In this book that I wish to give to you, or we wish to give to you, that we wrote with Jimena, it's in Spanish.
This is the new book, right?
See, it's called Human Habitat in 6 Essays of Cultural Biology. It is not translated to English, but it is in Spanish and in Portuguese. I can give you either of these two versions. And there we have an essay about what we call systemic laws. And this book, this is an interesting book, it's 6 essays. Some we wrote together with Jimena, and there is one that she wrote alone and one that I wrote alone, but the others we wrote together. And the book is a co-authorship, actual co-authorship, not a juxtaposition. And the systemic laws are abstractions of the coherences of systemic processes. They are not definitions, they are abstractions of the operational relational coherences of systemic processes. And one law says, whenever in a collection of elements some relations begin to be conserved, a space is open for everything else to change around the relations that are conserved. And this happens just like that. Whenever you begin to conserve something, everything else is open to change. And this is why what is important in change is what is conserved.
Say that again.
What is important or significant in change is what is being conserved. We want to change around what? Around what shall we conserve around which everything is going to be changed?
So we have to notice the changes that are arising spontaneously in some ways in order to conserve them.
If we wish to conserve them.
Yeah.
We want to realize what is there that is happening, do we wish to conserve it? For example, something that happens to all of us. Since we remember, we have been alive. Since you remember, you were a living child. And now you're a living adult. And what has been conserved, because you have changed. I imagine that when you were a child, you were not so tall, and you did not speak or speak very little. Or what has been, all these changes have taken place around what that has been conserved. And what has been conserved is living as a human being. But in this process, what the shape of your body, what you do, what you think has changed. But you have remained a human being conserved in this process. Because humanness is conserved. It's not something fixed.
So we're conserving our identity of humanness.
Exactly. And when we lose our identity of humanness, somebody will say, what happens to you? You are not the same. What has happened to you?
This is, I would suggest, as you said, you were conserving self-respect and love, but I think there's also another kind of love that's being conserved at a broader level.
Yes.
So there might be a fourth.
Might be a fourth.
I experienced it, so I think you're conserving.
One can do that.
Yeah.
But love is the central thing for seeing.
Yes.
So if I have to accept the legitimacy of, let's say, I will say I wish to conserve the attitude that allows me to see whatever happens, without expectation, without demands, without prejudices. And this is love.
Well, I'm having a direct experience of that. This is wonderful. It's just, it's a great gift. And the fact that you're living it makes it profound.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.